Hello and welcome to Worst Quality Crab, a podcast of Asian American stories and recipes for best quality hearts. I am your host, Freesia Lee. As always, joining me is my husband and producer, Sam.
Hello.
And this week we have guest with us. She's art fundraiser, vinyl collector, and considers herself Liverpool FC's biggest fan. I say considers herself because I'm not going to contest that one. But we have with us Nicole Lugtu. Welcome, Nicole.
Hi.
Thanks for being here.
How are you guys?
We're good.
Good.
We're better now that you're here.
I'm glad to hear that.
I'll just say, not sure that Sam knows this, but I basically told Nicole about our podcast a few months ago, and within the same breath was like, and you should come on the show. And now here we are. So I'm very excited to have you here.
I'm excited to be here. I mean, when you told me about the podcast, when we first met, I was like, oh man, that's so cool. That's so cool. And then you're like, come on. And I was like, okay, why not?
Yeah. Well, and it was something that you said, and it was, I think, based off something that Chelsea Wong had said, artist Chelsea Wong, shout out, about your dad bribing you with tempura.
Yes.
I just thought that was so great.
Food serves many functions. So for context, I'm very afraid of needles. So to get my shots when I was growing up, and even now, as an adult, I have to have a treat sort of dangled at the end, usually in the form of food, to get through those kinds of things.
Mhm.
And it's effective. I can't say that it doesn't work.
I feel that. It's nice to hear you're not the only one. I'm not the only one that puts a little treat at the end of a hard thing to do.
No, I think it's very natural to use food as a treat, something to look forward to that's very tangible and very immediate. You can just go get it, and instantly it makes the experience a little better.
Yes, for sure. I think what was so interesting about yours, and also yours was being tempura and Chelsea's being roast duck, was it was as kids, it wasn't like a candy or like a cookie. It was this very savory, umami kind of grown-up food. And I was like, tell me more about this. But anyway, speaking of food, because that's what we do here, let us get into the dish that you brought, because I think we have a lot of conversations around its main ingredient.
Yes. Yes.
So what are you bringing for us today? What's the dish? Who is making this for you? How are you eating it? Tell us all the things.
Yeah, so the dish that I'm bringing to you all today is tinola, which is essentially in its simplest form a Filipino chicken soup. And people always ask me, well, what makes it different from other chicken soups? And to be honest, not much. Every culture has its version of chicken soup, and I think it's pretty much the same. But in tinola, it's chicken, the star, I would say, of the soup. Garlic, ginger, onions, and fish sauce. And then there's also green vegetable in it. In my family, it was always spinach, sometimes chayote, which is a crisp squash that is from Mexico. Of course, with the spread of Spanish settlers, chayote also ends up in other places too. I think that's the story. So sometimes my dad will make it with that. But I know in the Philippines you can make it with pepper leaves, other green vegetables. My dad always says, oh, if you don't have spinach, you can use kale. You can use, I once made a fancy version with Swiss chard. Although I wouldn't say that's super fancy. It was just what I had in my fridge. So it's pretty versatile. And like I mentioned, my dad is the one who would make this for our family growing up. It was a dish that was on pretty regular weeknight dinner rotation. My dad cooked almost every day when we were growing up, and there's a couple of Filipino staples that would rotate in and out every week. And tinola was definitely my favorite of all of those things, primarily because it's been mentioned on your show before, but Filipino food is typically seen as being pretty heavy on beef and pork, and that's definitely true. And tinola always stands out to me because its main protein is chicken, and I'm a really big chicken fan, so it means a lot to me in that way.
You mentioned that you're a chicken fan.
Yes.
So some backstory why this is funny to me. When I met Sam for the first time, literally the first time we met in a lot of years ago, it essentially went something like, "This is Sam. He loves chicken." No joke. So I just would like to listen to you two have a conversation about your love for chicken because I like it as a protein. It's very good. And also, I do not understand I mean, I do, but also I would just like to observe this chicken love in action, I think.
I think for me, it started with my mom's soy sauce chicken that she makes from scratch. And that was my favorite thing eating when I was growing up. And then it kind of just naturally translated to like me trying other chicken dishes and them being like pretty good. And I just decided that I loved chicken. It's not really like head over heels thing for me. You know, it's just like a common thing that I could get into, and like it's not fussy, and I know if it's available I could eat it and it's no big deal. Like it's that sort of thing for me, to be fair. And I just think it's kind of funny to be like I love chicken as a personality trait.
That's interesting because when Frisia and I were talking earlier this week, I thought, well, oh, it sounds like Sam's like really like obsessed with chicken. Like he must know like all the good chicken places. Like I was gonna interrogate you about what kind of chicken you want because like honestly like I think I love chicken as a personality trait of mine. Like I'm obsessed.
Yeah, apologies.
I mean, I'll just say this is actually the first time that I've heard Sam like talk back how much he loves chicken. I guess we haven't talked about this in 20 years also. But this is the first time it sounded practical to me because when I first met him, it was a personality trait of like he loves chicken. And I was like, "Do you love it more than this?" And he was like, "Yes." And I was like, "Do you love it more than this?" And he was like, "Yes." So I'm surprised by how tame this is.
I mean, all that is probably true. Like I love it more than
Yeah. No,
anything.
that's fair. That's fair. We should talk about chicken places, but Nicole, like, how did you come to love chicken? And we'll talk about Tinola more, but how did you come to love chicken?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think it's similar to you, Sam. Like, I just started organically liking it as a kid. I guess starting with Tinola, but not even that. I mean, I think that also extends to choosing chicken nuggets over burgers at McDonald's always. Like going to Chili's and ordering chicken tenders. And I think that starts out for like a lot of kids. Like chicken nuggets and chicken tenders are great things for kids to order.
Right.
And I think in that way it just like stuck with me and then it grew as an adult. I don't know if as an adult, but like into some kind of obsession. Like my parents make fun of me, actually. I think like when I was a teenager, on my 16th birthday, my dad took me to the unfortunately now closed Cafe Rouge restaurant in Berkeley, which was like a super iconic French bistro that unfortunately closed down. Oh my god, I think like 7 years ago or something like that. And it for a long time it was my favorite restaurant in the entire Bay Area. My dad took me there for the first time on my 16th birthday, and I ordered like roast chicken there. And I still remember this dish and really falling in love with it. And then I think around that time I realized like how much I just preferred chicken and fish actually like over red meat, even though I ate red meat like all the time, growing up Filipino in a Filipino household. And then it just kind of stuck. Like when I was in college, I just started to notice like if I'm at Chipotle, I'm ordering chicken, like a chicken bowl, that kind of thing. And it just grew from there. And then it like more recently, like right before COVID, I learned how to butcher chickens, not slaughter
Oh.
chickens. People
Mm.
people are always like, "Oh, like you like kill chickens in your free time?" Like, no, you buy them at the grocery
Mhm.
store. And I used some like Christmas money that my parents gave me to take a meat butchery class, and I learned how to break down chickens. So I've started making my own chicken stock, and it's a lot cheaper than like buying chicken pieces that are already prepared. So I got like that into it.
That's awesome.
Yeah, yeah. And like I asked for a chicken cookbook from my parents last Christmas. It's like a thing. It's a thing.
I love that. Also, Sam and I recently saw a video of Martin Yan breaking down a chicken. He's like, "Can I do this in less than 30 seconds?" And they time him and it's like 22 seconds. And I was like, "Oh shit. That is like next level." So that is what I'm expecting for you at some point in the future.
I would love to.
There was one Thanksgiving where I forget who it was, but like someone was having trouble cutting into the turkey, and I was like, "What's the big deal?" And I think I took over, and I was like, "It's just like breaking down a chicken. Like you got the legs, you got the wings, you got the bone in the middle, and it just I don't know. I think I guess I downplay my love of chicken, but I also like know like very specific
Mhm.
things about chicken and eating the chicken and how the bones work.
This is true. Whenever we get a Costco chicken, like he will cut it up, break it down, serve it to the kids, and when I have to do it, I'm like, where do I? Ugh, I don't like that, and it's like messier and whatever. Although I'm learning, being married to a chicken lover, I'm learning.
I also think it's like kind of a red flag if people like really hate chicken
Oh yeah.
because it's like it's so inoffensive. Like how could you hate it?
Yeah, I don't.
You know, that's people in my family, right?
Do they?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I guess.
It's fine. They get a pass.
Yeah, I don't. I could not date a person who didn't like chicken. I think that would upset me greatly. Like you can dislike other things, like that's okay, but you need to like chicken to be my partner. It's a requirement.
Going back to Tinola and your dad making this for you
Mm,
and you loving it. Was this a beloved family dish?
it's a great question because it's quite a controversial topic in the family, to be honest. So, in my family, my dad cooked. He was the primary cook in the family, but everybody in my family can cook. So, my mom also cooked as well. Like I mentioned, like my dad would rotate, tinola with adobo, picadillo, like these other Filipino dishes. Sometimes not. Sometimes pasta. I mean, he was always experimenting in the house with different cuisines and different ingredients. So I feel very lucky in that way. But generally, it's like when I was growing up, my recollection is that whatever my dad cooks or whatever anybody cooks in our house, like we eat it for dinner and everybody eats it. It wasn't until I was an adult and it was one of those like over dinner conversations where uh, as a family, we also like to just talk about food. And it was like, what's your favorite? I think it was something like, what's your favorite dish that like dad makes? And oh, I said tinola. I was like, it's the best. It's simple. It's like very comforting. The whole chicken thing too. And then my mom and my sister were both like, we actually don't like it. And it was like news to me
Wow.
and also news to my dad. He was like, "What? Like what do you mean?" Kind of. I'm not sure if he really like had an idea of this, but I think that she does like it. Like she likes the broth, is what she always says. And she's like, I really like the broth, but sometimes if she can see like a blood in the chicken or anything, like it doesn't make it so appetizing for her. But I do think that she likes
Mhm.
the flavor, so I don't think she like super hates it or anything. But my sister, she thinks it's like just okay. Like I think in comparison to the other things that we ate, um, that it's just not as special for her personally as like some of the other
Mm.
stuff that we grew up eating. But now it's turned into this like running joke where like my dad and I are like very firmly like team tinola. Like my dad still makes it just for himself, knowing that my mom won't eat too much of it.
Mhm.
Um, and then I make it for myself. I made some earlier this week, especially when it's cold, like it is right now.
Mhm.
But my sister's just not interested at all, and that's fine. She just has her own favorites.
Yeah. I actually have a question too. Like, as we
Mm.
are learning more about Filipino foods and particularly soups and stews through this show, I'm noticing that there is like usually a sour element to a lot of them. Does this have that also?
No,
Mm.
I wouldn't think so. I wouldn't say so, at least the way that my family makes it. And I don't really. I guess it depends. I'm not really sure about other families. I mean, they might add
Yeah,
stuff, but
sure.
for us, it's pretty. it's like a pretty straightforward like chicken soup.
Okay.
I'd say like the thing about it is that it's very salty because I mean I love fish sauce, so I put tons of it in, and then I also put some on top after it's done. So for
Mhm.
me, I really like that super salty like fish sauce flavor that goes really well with the chicken. So I would say that's maybe like the surprise sort of signature flavor in a tinola
Mm,
more than
okay.
anything else.
I think I saw a recipe online where it was like they recommended just having a little dish of fish sauce on the side to like dip your chicken in.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, I think that would be cool. For me, I'm just dousing it. Like it's crazy. Like I have to have like the bottle of fish sauce like just ready to go. And I would say in some cases like I maybe overdress my tinola with fish sauce. And it has to be squid brand. Like
Oh.
the squid brand fish sauce it's the fish sauce I grew up eating. It's one my dad always bought. Although he started buying Red Boat recently and tried to like get the family on Red Boat. I'm gonna be
Mm.
honest, like I just don't think it can compare.
You're like, I don't want my fish sauce to come from Whole Foods.
No, no, it has to be squid brand, even though it has no squid in it. You know what I mean?
I am unfamiliar with squid brand, but want to try it.
Oh, run out and get it.
Yeah, I'm unfamiliar with Squid brand, but familiar with the idea of like it is this brand or nothing, which sometimes I think is how our kids are with certain things that I don't realize, like ketchup.
Whenever fish sauce appears in recipes, it's always like very cautious, like don't use too much because it's a very strong flavor and add a little as you go. And meanwhile, I'm like, this tastes fine. Like I could like pour a ton of it in here and like I could add more if I wanted to. Like I'm worried that I'm just a salt fiend or something.
I think so too, because even like beyond tinola, like my dad made for us nearly every Sunday when I was growing up, another dish called nilaga, which is like a clear soup of like beef broth soup,
Mhm.
which is like not too dissimilar from tinola, except it has a bit more vegetables. And in our case, like we put chorizo in it too to bring like a bit more flavor.
Whoa.
Oh,
Interesting.
Yeah.
I see now why your sister likes this.
I mean, I don't want to speak for her, but I think that for my sister, that would be like the touchstone dish for her
Mm.
because we did eat it every Sunday. Like even now, like if we are visiting at home as adults, and my parents don't live too far away, but my dad will make nilaga for us to eat or to bring home. But that's also a thing where you can dress it with fish sauce after.
Mhm.
And I'm just like sitting at the table, just aggressively dumping the fish sauce on, and it's just I don't know. I really like the taste of it. Like I don't think you can put enough fish sauce in anything.
Same. I kind of hold back because I'm usually cooking for the kids, and I don't know if they would reject it if there's like too much of one flavor in, and I don't want to make it too salty for them either.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, but do you feel like they're gonna like it, or it might grow on them? Like, have you used it yet?
I think so. I mean, I make like a fried rice for them pretty regularly, and there's a fish sauce component to it that I add, and they don't seem to complain about it.
Also, juicy broccoli.
Actually, I don't put fish sauce in that.
Really?
Yeah, that's more oyster sauce. I guess it's
Oh, okay.
kind of seafood sauce.
I thought you did fish sauce in all of the vegetables.
No,
I was wrong.
not recently.
Okay.
Maybe a version previously.
Fair. Insider talk on how we make vegetables in this house.
I'm fascinated about juicy broccoli. Like that just sounds incredible.
It's just real saucy broccoli that our kids named Juicy Broccoli, and it has stuck.
It's basically broccoli that's doused in oyster sauce.
That sounds so good. I mean, I would definitely eat that.
It sounds like food has been a really important part of your family growing up. Did you kind of always have this diverse palate, or like, how did you like come to love food so much?
My parents. It's coming back to them a lot because they really are the origin of everything. And I'm really grateful to them for exposing us to so many different kinds of food, like beyond just our own culture. And I think it's just the way that they are, to be honest. Ever since I was a kid, like going out to eat was also just as important as cooking at home. So on the weekends, we would drive out to San Mateo because my dad heard about some great Japanese restaurant in the newspaper or later on like on Yelp. Like he'd see places with good reviews, or we'd drive up to Santa Rosa or Napa. And that's like not close by, like
Mhm.
not close by, like where we grew up. And you're driving like over half an hour away just to eat somewhere. And I think that was really formative for me, especially to appreciate different kinds of food and to have like a diverse palate. Like there's very few things that I don't eat, and I think it's because of that. And I also found out, before my parents had kids, they did that. Like when they went out on dates, they would go out to restaurants.
That's so cute.
Yeah. Like they would tell us about like the Japanese Filipino restaurants they'd go to in Manila. And when they lived in New York, when we visited New York as a family for the first time, they took us to a Japanese restaurant they had gone to like before they had kids. That was still there.
Aw.
Wow.
And there's also just stuff where when we go to McDonald's, they like to order like a caramel shake with a side of fries, and they dip the fries in the ice cream.
Wow.
And it seemed also to be like a very central part of like how they spent time together, and they passed that on to us just through like cooking at home and making sure that we ate like every kind of food that we could in the Bay. And I didn't realize like that was kind of like a weird thing to do until I started like I was in I speak French, and I took French classes in high school. And every Monday the prompt would be what did you do this weekend? And I would have these stories like, oh yeah, like we drove down to San Jose and we went to this Vietnamese restaurant, and have stories like that, or like go into the Sunset and there was a Chinese restaurant we ate at all the time. There's also a Vietnamese restaurant called Loy's that unfortunately closed this year, that I've been going to since I was a kid. And then my classmates would be like, wow, you do a lot of driving to go eat places on the weekend. And I was like, well, what did you do this weekend? Like, I would ask, and then they'd be like, oh, just stayed home. Like I was, just hanging around here. And I was like, oh, like, is it, and I started to wonder, like, is it weird that like we as a family, like love to go out and eat? But I don't think it's really weird. I'm just now grateful that we did those kinds of things for sure.
That's awesome. That's really cute that, like, it's the carryover from your parents' pre-kids life. Should we do that? Do we have too many kids for that? Maybe. Have you ever asked them, or, like, do you have any sense of how food became such an important part of their lives and their relationship?
Yeah, I think they have kind of different stories, I guess. On my dad's side, in the Philippines, it's not uncommon for families to have cooks in the house, and it's not like a rich person sort of thing. It's like it kind of just happens. It's part of like the economy there. But he was, very close to the people who cooked when he was growing up, and his mom also, like with the recipes, the family recipes and everything. And my dad told me that right around the time my parents got married, he had asked to be taught the dishes that he was used to, that he grew up with. And I guess, bring that to his future family too, which I think is really cool. And it was all passed down orally. So like there isn't like a book or anything. He was like
Oh.
in the kitchen, like watching and learning. So that's how he taught me how to cook, actually. My dad taught me how to cook primarily. But my mom cooks too. She makes killer lasagna and flan.
Mm.
Those are her standout dishes
Oh.
that I love. I love to
Yes,
make.
please.
Yeah, yeah. But for her, her great grandmother owned a cooking school in Manila, or my great grandmother, her grandma, and they were very close. So she taught my mom how to, make cakes. I think the flan recipe comes from her, and these recipes are super super old school too. So we do have a book that was typed up, I think, by my aunt of those recipes, but they're pretty like 1940s, 1950s. Some of them are quite Western, like chicken Kiev and like all those kinds of
Mm.
classic
Mhm.
dishes. But there's also some like Filipino dishes mixed in there as well. But it's mostly desserts. We call my great grandma Lola Baker because she liked to bake.
Mm. Mhm.
So there's also like a legacy there where on my mom's side too of there being like a home cooked meals. and that being important too.
That's awesome. Was the cooking school teaching more like Filipino foods or Western foods or combo?
I actually don't really know. Although my mom and I once found an article from like a Philippine newspaper about a woman who was one of my great grandma's students. And she was like selling the apple cake that she learned from my great grandma for business, like as a product, which is like really cool to
Oh,
know.
yeah.
I think just looking at the recipe book, I think it was mostly like Western cakes and like dishes for entertaining, I think
Mm.
was
Mm.
my impression. But I actually don't really know. My mom did go to some classes and she talks a lot about the baked goods. So I think that was primarily it.
Man, why do we always record the show when I need a snack? All I want is apple cake right now. That have you made any of those recipes?
I have. So I think this was like in the middle of COVID. I thought it was important to take some of these like typewritten pages and put them on like in a Google Doc. But then also to write down the recipes that my dad knew, like they were inside of his head.
Mhm.
And then also record like my mom's recipes and also some recipes that my sister and I make together and things like that. And I was actually trying to make a cookbook, like actually publish a cookbook, not for commercial
Yeah,
sale,
Mm.
but, but to like present as a gift to my family.
that's awesome. You should do that.
I know I need to still finish it. I can't say I've made much progress, but part of like this crazy idea I had was to make a recipe every week
Mm.
Ooh.
from like the canon of like
Yeah.
all of our family recipes. I had a little like diary where I was writing down what I thought of everything. So I have tried because my great grandma's recipes are really technical. I'm not much of a baker myself. There was like a failed chocolate cake that my sister and I made that was just like so bad. But on the other hand, there was a butter cake, which is like an amazing recipe that I just made for Christmas. And I've made this many times in my life, like when I was a kid and like everything. And that's like a bulletproof recipe. Like it comes out perfect every single time kind of thing. So like to varying degrees of success. But I have tried and it's been an interesting experiment, like trying to replicate recipes from the recent past and also the very distant past as well.
Mhm.
It was very illuminating and I should continue doing this.
And continue documenting it because I would be interested in this. Not to make you like a content
Would
creator,
you?
but like, yes, I am. I mean, because I think this also gets to my second question or my next question of like, does this like connect you more deeply to your family and to family members who I'm guessing have passed or just, are not living with you?
Yes. Yes. Oh, very much. I think because I was born in the West, so I was born in Canada, and my sister she was born in New Jersey. So we're like the only cousins, I think, in our generation who were not born in the Philippines. And I could be wrong. I have a lot of cousins,
Fair.
Yes.
unsurprisingly. Huge family. But because we primarily grew up here, and even today, like most of both sides of my family, they live in Manila. Like they still live in the Philippines. And I also lived there as well, like when I was very young. So I'm grateful for that because when I was between the ages of 4 and 5, like I lived in the Philippines in very close proximity to both sides of my family. Three of my grandparents were still living at that time. So I got to spend time with them, and that was really cool. But I was also very young. So, when you're young, you're really adaptable. And like moving from the frozen tundra of Canada to the tropics of Manila
Yeah.
leaves an impression on a person, even at a young age. But we only lived there for a year. So I think like a lot of Asian people born in the West are primarily being raised in the West. Like, food is the primary way that you feel connected, not only to your culture, but I think specifically for me to people who I didn't know very well. The legacy of what I've inherited from my ancestors. There's a lot of things I feel that I've inherited from my ancestors, like a love of art and so many other things. But the food, I think, it just feels so close to people that were with us but are no longer with us, like my grandma on my mom's side, but even like my great grandma, who I didn't know at all, but was like an important figure in the family, like to be able to reproduce food that she makes, and for my mom to say, this tastes just like
Mm.
what grandma used to make,
Mhm.
that's a very satisfying and like important feeling because it's almost like you can bring something back or never lose something because you can follow something and resurface like memories for other people who might remember,
Yeah.
what that was like or what home is like. So I love that. I think that's like very cool and encouraging. And I don't know if you guys like if you've ever experienced something like that too.
I mean, I think for me, no, actually. And like, this sounds really beautiful to me. And I'm like, oh, I hope that someday our kids or grandkids will feel this because I don't think that I do. And I think in part, I I think my great grandmother passed when I was like a baby or very young. So I have no memory there. My
Mm,
grandmother is still alive and like cooks and, we see her all the time, but never really took up cooking in the way of like, this is a signature dish and I'm going to make it the same way every time.
mhm,
And the way my family cooks now, and I think this is maybe a product of their generation and also, having my grandmother was born here and so our sort of like their legacy in California or whatever. I think they've always just sort of grown up in like, I'm gonna cook a thing and then I'm gonna evolve it and we're gonna try a new thing and try a new thing. And there are very few family dishes, or very few dishes in my family that I would say are like repeat hangers on from decades past.
mhm.
And even those, they don't make them the same way anymore. Whether it's, they've forgotten how or new technology or speed or whatever, I don't think we necessarily have that same thing. Although I think my mom would be offended because there are a couple of things that she still makes that I remember from my childhood that I'm like, oh, yes, this tastes like childhood. But it's like a breakfast
Mhm.
potato or, a couple of dishes. But I don't think it goes back any further than that. It's like just my memory of childhood.
Well, that's funny because I feel like half the things I make are purely for nostalgia's sake because I'm like miss the taste of my childhood or something. Although I guess I don't know if there's any like recipes that were passed down from previous generations that
Mm.
my mom has.
Like the recipes are important, but we also have like a legacy Chinese restaurant order
Oh,
on my dad's side.
Oh, say more.
what is it?
This is what we're here for.
Yes, I know. I guess it's just to point out, like, yeah, recipes are great, and like you can like I said all those like really sentimental things about recreating the past, but also it could also be an order at a restaurant.
Yes, this I do have actually.
Yeah. Okay. Yes. Okay. Great. So, for us, and I didn't. Again, this is something I didn't know until I was, well into like early adulthood. But every time we order food from our local Chinese restaurant, shout out to New Lim's Garden on Clayton Road. It is barbecue pork fried rice, sweet and sour pork because my sister she loves sweet and sour pork, and then usually like Hong Kong style pan fried noodle that will be in the rotation, and some kind of seafood tofu clay pot, which is something my dad really likes, and of course there has to be some kind of chicken dish for me.
Mhm.
Right now it's like black bean, like string bean chicken, like
Mm.
that's a solid one, or like those
Mm.
half fried chickens
Yeah.
with the shrimp crackers. That's also something.
Oh,
So
yeah. Classic.
that's the order.
Yeah.
Like, sometimes we have to discuss, okay, what kind of chicken are we getting, like that kind of thing. But it's the same everywhere, every single place, even when we travel. Like, it's the same thing. And it's also kind of like a running joke in our family too. But I found out later, like, that is more or less the same order that my dad's family would order at a Chinese restaurant in Manila when he was growing up. It's the
Oh.
same.
Oh.
And like other members of our family, like my cousins, when my sister visited the Philippines like almost 10 years ago, they took her to a Chinese restaurant, same order, the same thing. And I was like, wow, like that is
That's amazing.
insane.
That's awesome.
I'm curious about yours though.
I mean,
Tell me about
it's
yours.
not that different. It's different, but it's not that different. It's funny you mentioned the chicken because, like, I'd sort of forgotten that we used to do this because we used to go out to Chinese restaurants as a family a lot more. And I think in part it was just like, for sure it was when my grandfather was alive, but it was just like the easy go to. We had a favorite place. We had a few favorite places. A couple of them have since closed. Shout out Dragon House on Geary, RIP, love you forever. Um, so sad. But essentially, like, if it was kind of like a regular, we're just going out, there would be, and it just sort of depended on who was there too, but like the half fried crispy chicken with the shrimp chips for sure, like a braised tofu, braised mushrooms situation. That was like my dish. A sweet and sour, a garlic spinach. Trying to remember what else. But like those were definitely big staples. And then if it was like a little bit of a special occasion and we were all there, then my grandfather used to do this thing where like we would all pick a dish. And then it got to a point where he would just be like, oh, we're getting this because it's your favorite, and this is your favorite, and this is your favorite. Whether or not it was still our favorite or ever was, it didn't really matter. But that was like,
Mhm.
I came to realize much later that like that was his way of showing care and love, to be like, I know what your favorite thing is, and I'm going to order it for you. So like for my mom, it would be like honey walnut prawns. So we would always have
Okay.
that. There would be some sort of beef dish for my stepdad by the time he came along. Because surprise, just secret, he's the person that doesn't like chicken. There are many other wonderful things about him to his credit, but he does not eat chicken. And then I think there would always be a soup. And then my grandma would usually pick like some kind of pork clay pot something. And then if it was like really special and I really had my way, it would be the like ginger green onion crab.
Mhm. Yes.
Yeah. And then they would just look at me as I like sat, as all the plates were being cleared, but I was like still working on the crab. And I would just like pick at it. And some of them didn't want to eat crab because it was too much work. And I was like, no, I'll do the work. But then it got to a point where they're like, do you want it here? You take the leftover crab home. And I was like, no, it doesn't keep the same. I have to eat it right now or not at all. And then once we had kids, like that just stopped entirely. But yeah, that was our go-tos. Sam, did you have that?
Oh,
No, you guys didn't. Did you go out? You're like, your mom can make all of this.
No. Well, I would go to Chinese school every Saturday, and there were a few years, I think by the time my sister was in college, where we would go to a Chinese restaurant close by. Like Saturday night would be like the easy night for my mom. We would go with my parents, friends, to a Chinese restaurant, and it would be typically kind of the same order, like the chicken with the shrimp chips, the walnut prawns, like a fried flounder, like a deep fried flounder thing, some veg, maybe a sweet and sour thing. And then like they'd bring me home, and then all the grown-ups would go to a neighbor's house and play mahjong for the whole night. I was going to ask earlier, you mentioned that you cooked with your sister.
Mm.
Like, is that like a regular thing you do? Like, what's that like, and why do you do it?
Oh, that's a good question. So it's funny, when we were little, we were kids, I think I was the one who like more proactively asked my dad to teach me how to cook. But my sister, it took just a little longer. It wasn't until she moved to France, and was about to leave, she'd asked my dad to show her, how to cook things like nilaga and like other things too, while she was away. And she became like more interested in cooking a little later. But because, food is such a central part of our family, it I think it just like organically became something that we do together. And I still see my sister every week. She doesn't live too far away from me here in the Bay. So every Friday we usually go out to eat, but there was definitely times during COVID where we were cooking a lot together. And it really was like just a variety of things. Like some of the family recipes, we look through all like our cookbooks, like the cookbooks that she and I have, and like make French stews and or make curry, or make bolognese, and really get into it. And I think it's just, yeah, like a another offshoot of growing up in a family where we all liked to cook together. And even now, it's still super important. Like just like the more recent holidays that we've all had, um, everybody, instead of like my dad cooking everything, it's like my sister now will make the mashed potatoes, or and I'll make the vegetables, or I'll make dessert. I made the butter cake not for Christmas this year. Or there's even a time when I was, attempting to trade homemade, like butchering chickens from my sister in exchange for egg salad.
Does she make a good egg salad?
Yeah, yeah. So, my sister lived in Japan,
Oh.
like
Oh.
right before COVID, and Kewpie has been well loved and well known in our family for many years. It took me a long time to get used to it for some reason. I had kind of a sensitive palate when I was young, but I love it now. And I don't know, she just makes egg salad in this way where it's fluffy and like there's a lot of mayo and it's just like salt and pepper. Like there's no other, when we grew up, egg salad had relish in it, which is also good in its own
Mhm.
way. But yeah, she makes really good egg salad, and she's like, "Oh, you can just make this yourself." And I'm like, "I'm sure that I can, but I think that you just make it better than me." Is my reason.
Uh,
But yeah, we love my sister. We love to cook together, and it's true. Like with all members of like my family, and just like my mom, my dad too. I think that we all just we like that. Like I'm always hanging out near the kitchen, like around the kitchen when somebody's cooking, and everybody in my family does that. Like when my dad's cooking something, my sister and I are sometimes just standing there next to him,
mm,
not doing anything. I mean, offering to help,
sure,
obviously, but
sure.
like, you know, stealing bites of like what's done, that
Yeah.
kind of thing. Yeah.
As a kid should do in the kitchen, honestly. Have you learned to cook a lot of Filipino foods? And do you feel more inclined to do so?
Yeah, I have actually. It's funny because like when my dad was teaching me how to cook, the first thing he taught me how to cook was an egg. He was like, "Okay, my child is asking me how to cook." And like this is like a very formative experience for me, but like every Saturday morning he'd make me cook like a bunch of like over easy eggs one at
Oh,
a time. Yeah, just for like the family, like for breakfast or whatever. But that means I'm really good at making them now. But sometimes my mom makes fun of me. She's like, "Nicole, like why can't you just put all the eggs in the pan at one time?" And I'm like, "No, one at a
because you
time."
can't flip 4 eggs.
No, it's too hard. I can do two now, but like it's too hard. Like we can't,
Mhm.
don't mess up the system. So my dad started out with that, and then he would and then it gradually turned into, because both my parents worked, and so my sister and I would be at home, like, "Oh, Nicole, I marinated a roast beef, can you he would call from work and be like, preheat the oven to this temperature, when it's ready, like put it in, and then it would be done by the time my dad came home so he
Mm.
could just finish like making the fries or whatever."
Sam, remember this for when our kids are older. This is a hot tip.
Yeah, this is the
Yeah.
manual. This is how you do it. So it was sort of like a Karate Kid sort of. I was just sous chef for like a long time, and then it just grew from there. I don't know. I find cooking to be relaxing. I know not a lot of people find that, but my dad started out with those kinds of like super basic stuff. He taught me how to cut stuff. I also learned how to cook from watching the Food Network
Yes, same.
too. My dad and I would watch it together. Like, there's also this like hotel restaurant show called Great Chefs of the World that they showed on like early Discovery Channel.
Hmm.
And these
Huh.
were people who were like classically trained chefs, but I would watch that after school. So I learned how to chop a lot of things from shows like that. I remember I was once chopping an onion in front of some people, of all places, a college party in San Luis Obispo. I don't know why this was happening, to be honest, but some people were like, "Wow, you'll chop onions like a professional chef." And I was like, "I don't know. Like I learned that from TV. I don't even know what to say." Um, but to your question, yeah, I think because like my dad not only showed me how to cook regular stuff, but also Filipino food because he cooked it all the time and I could just watch. It kind of organically came to that. Like I know how to make most of the things that my dad makes, and it tastes the same, even though it's all verbal directions with no
Mhm.
measurements. Like I can somehow get it to taste the same. And my mom always says that I cook with feeling. Like she used to watch me as I was learning. She used to joke that my dad and I don't know if you guys saw on old PBS, like Jacques Pepin had a show
Mhm.
with his daughter
Mhm.
Claudine.
Yep.
And my mom always used to say, like, "Oh my God, you and your dad should be on a show together. Like, you guys are cooking all the time. And like, it's so cute." And, I think that it's just like that whole part of it, like, watching my dad cook all these things and then asking him later on, to show me how to do it, like, as an adult. I'm glad that I can make those things for myself now. But of course, I don't turn it down when he makes it and he sends me home, like, with a Tupperware, like,
Oh,
you
yeah,
can't beat the OG.
for sure.
Yeah.
Oh, I love that. You had mentioned before in preparation for this about food as a way to assert your identity.
Mhm.
And I'm just sort of curious, like, what that means for you and how that shows up today.
It's interesting. It's something that I've never really thought of until, anticipating coming on and talking about food with you both, that like some of your other guests have said, and I think it's just known, like in Filipino culture, like food is everything, or in Asian culture generally, like food is everything. It can mean so many different things to people. And for me, like an interesting way that manifests itself is because of the way I was raised. I was born in Canada. I did live in the Philippines and like was very closely connected to my culture, my heritage there, but have grown up here in America. So that's like a mixture of like a lot of different cultures already. Like,
Mhm.
just based on your environment, you are like where you grow up in a lot of ways. But then, like a lot of people who've, you know, grown up in different cultures or in different parts of the world, when you put your roots down, it sort of feels like you're split between all those places. Like, I'm maybe too American in the Philippines, but here, I'm
Mhm.
Filipino. Or even like I'm Canadian. Like, what an interesting way to be othered. Once people find out about that, you know,
It's true. We don't like Canadians for some reason.
I don't know, America's hat. I mean, just get with it. It's all good, But I think that like growing up, it also means you have to explain yourself a lot.
Yeah.
Like a lot of other people, I think, people kind of get confused. The classic, like, where are you from? Like, no, where are you really
Mm.
from? And
Mhm.
I definitely mess with people by being like, I'm from Canada, and like
Right.
you can't really move on
Yeah.
from that sometimes. Um, but it's in terms of identity, like I know I'm very comfortable with it. Like I'm all of those things. I'm Filipino, I'm Canadian, I'm American. Like that's so much part of who I am, and it is what makes me unique in some certain ways, and I love it. Like I think it's awesome. But I think the easiest way sometimes to I don't want to use the word prove, but that is what it feels like because, when you tell people, and I know that I had mentioned this to you both, but I'm Filipino, but I very outwardly present as Chinese. Like I have a lot of Chinese heritage in my family. Like that's a fact on both
Mhm.
sides. I can almost trace like that immigration story
Mm.
from China to the Philippines in a way. It's the paper trail is not very clear, but it's on both sides of my family, and the way that I look sometimes is not it's not always immediately obvious to people, including like other Filipinos, that I'm Filipino. So, you inevitably get into a conversation and it's like, oh, like, where is your family from? Which I think is, it comes up a lot sometimes. And especially sometimes when you're talking with other people who are of Asian descent, they're kind of curious. And like, I don't mind answering. I'm like, oh, I'm Filipino. And they're like, oh, like, I thought you were Chinese. And I'm like, yeah, I mean, I get that all the time. I've
Mhm.
been getting that since I was a kid. But especially sometimes when I talk with, other people in the Filipino community, the touchstone is like, "Oh, you're Filipino?" And I'm like, "Yeah, and you just naturally start talking about food, you know. "Oh, like nilaga," like,
Mhm.
"Oh, I went to this great Filipino restaurant," and or you just, shout out the places, "Oh, I grew up going to some Filipino restaurants down in South City, in Daly City."
Mhm.
Or, you talk about Jollibee, you throw out the Jollibee reference, and like people are all over it. And okay, of course, it's all in kindness. Like nothing is ever like I'm being questioned a lot, but it's the easiest way for me to like a secret
Yeah.
password to be like, oh yeah, I'm Filipino. Like I'm down with Dinuguan or something like
Mhm.
that, and they're like, oh yeah, okay, and then they understand. So it is an interesting way to use food as that entry point for people to understand my identity a bit better, to understand where I come from, because I even do that with the Canada stuff, Kinder Surprise, pickle flavored chips. Like those were not very popular here for a long time. You couldn't get them here.
That's a Canadian thing?
Yeah, I grew up eating
Oh.
those. Like, my mom would buy a bag of ketchup chips for my sister and like pickled chips for me.
Oh, shit. I love pickle chips. They're great. I never knew they were Canadian.
Yeah, they're amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh,
So like even for that side of myself,
yeah.
I have to throw out the Canadian foods.
Like you walk up to people and you're like, poutine, poutine. Sorry.
Basically, yeah, gravy is massive in the family, and I'm like, and I find that interesting. It's like a very easy way to get people to understand where you're from, and I think it's also like a very friendly way to tell people where you're from, and or get into a conversation about where they're from.
Mhm.
So I like to use it in that way, in a way where people can kind of see a window into who you are, like where you've been. That's actually kind of fun to me. I mean, I think a lot about how like Anthony Bourdain used to say, like to get to know a culture, like you should try somebody's food. Like it's even if you don't speak the same language,
Mhm.
like people can relate over a plate of food, and that's true. It's true in every sense. It's the best way and easiest way to get to know somebody, and I love that. I think that works in terms of showing people who I am. I found it to be like pretty effective.
I love this. Oh my God. This is so beautiful. And I feel like it's such a good endpoint. And also, I do want to talk about good chicken places in the city.
Yeah. Yes. Okay.
What's your favorite chicken?
My favorite chicken, funnily enough, I've had this conversation with my family and we've also broken it. We've tried to break it down into like where's the best roast chicken, where's the best fried
Yes,
chicken.
fair.
Yes, and it is difficult, but I still think my favorite roast chicken is the classic. It's Zuni. Like Zuni's so good. Like in the absence of Cafe Rouge,
Hmm.
which I mentioned earlier, which is sadly no longer with us. Like the Zuni chicken, I had it recently, and it's still really good. Like I know some people kind of get down on chicken because it's like, why would you pay a lot for a good chicken? But good roast chicken is actually really hard to find. But also shout out to the Costco chicken because
$5.
it's incredible.
Can't beat it.
It's a
Yeah.
staple. Yeah, yeah, like you can't beat that either. Like on the other end of the spectrum, like that's also a classic.
There was a time in high school when my mom would get Costco chicken so often. Sam can attest to how often my mom goes to Costco in general. But she, like, I think there would not be a day where we didn't have a Costco roast chicken in our house in some form, to the point where like I could not eat it for like a long time. But now, as an adult, feeding children, fully appreciate. Mhm.
You can make chicken salad, like really good chicken
Mhm.
salad out of that. Like with what's on the bone. Like, oh, it's so good. Fried chicken. I love Popeyes. I love it.
Solid.
It's the greatest ever fried chicken place. I don't know. There's something about it. Like it really can't be beat in terms of like American fried chicken. My whole family loves Popeyes. Like, shout out to Popeyes, just changing the game with how good their chicken is. But of course, I can't not mention Jollibee.
Mm.
I love Jollibee.
Mm.
When there isn't a Jollibee in Berkeley, but there is in Concord
Oh,
now.
really?
Yeah, yeah. There's I guess like 10, maybe more than 10 years ago, they opened a Seafood City, which is like a
Mm.
Filipino
Mhm.
grocery store, and it also has like other stores attached to it, like
Oh.
Valerios, the Filipino bakery, and everything. And they opened a Jollibee, and sometimes when I go home, my dad used to pick me up from the BART station, and then we'd go get Jollibee because I love Jollibee and the Jolly spaghetti. Like the fried chicken spaghetti combo is like I'm a huge fan. I love it. I love it so much. So for shout out to the Filipino fried chicken because Jollibee is amazing. I love it so much.
Nice. This is super random, but because we work at a museum, shout out to a different institution. Pre-COVID, California Academy of Sciences had a roast chicken and vegetables plate. And It was oddly like some of the best roast chicken I'd ever had, and side of vegetables, no less, like glazed carrots, these like caramelized Brussels sprouts, mashed potatoes. It was excellent. Like I told Sam that I wanted to just go there for lunch without our kids on a weekday. It was so good. And then COVID happened and they haven't brought it back. But it was like shocking how good this roast chicken was for just being at the museum.
It was one of those dishes where like we'd order it for ourselves as adults, and the kids would get like pizza or fries or something, chicken tenders or something like that. But inevitably, they would like end up nibbling on our roast chicken dish.
Yeah. I will say that's one of my like, I mean, there are a lot of many sad things about COVID, but in terms of like bummer things, like that dish will probably never come back. It's pretty up there for me because it was really good.
Oh, I'm surprised because, like, as we both know, sometimes like our museum cafe is really good now, but sometimes museum cafes are
Questionable.
they're sort of not going to be the highlight of your visit to the museum, right? Yeah.
Mhm. Have you been to RT Rotisserie?
I have.
What do you think?
I have, and I do like it. I do like it a lot. It's been a while since I've been there though, but I used to go there like pretty frequently.
Oh, Sam is laughing because I was like, I'm going to ask Nicole if she'll go to RT Rotisserie for lunch with me one day. Because it's walkable.
Yes,
It's like a
I
long
will.
walk, but it's walkable.
Yeah, I will.
Okay, let's do that.
Yeah, I used to work at the ballet, which was closer,
yeah.
so I used to walk there and go eat after work, actually, like, just go hang out.
Yeah. I used to be on a board where we would get dinner brought for us, and it was very close to RT Rotisserie, so it would just like be put in front of me a lot of times, and I was very grateful for that, and I'm no longer on that board, and so I really miss that dinner. So I need a new friend to eat RT Rotisserie with me. Not sponsored by RT Rotisserie, but get at us.
Anytime. I haven't been there, I think, in a few years, actually. I'd be down to go back.
Okay, let's go.
Let's do it.
I think this is the perfect place to end on our shared love of RT Rotisserie. No, we could honestly keep going, and I'm sure that we will offline, but probably no one else needs to hear us talk about very hyper-local chicken spots for that much longer. No, Nicole, this has been really, really great. I thought we would talk about Tinola more. We didn't. That's fine. Shocker. But we will get a recipe up based on your closest approximation to what you think you're putting in there when you're not measuring things.
Yeah.
Great.
Okay.
And no one will know. And then I think listeners, like if you want to make it, you just put a lot of extra fish sauce and then it's Nicole's version, right?
Yeah, basically. Yeah. 100%.
Yeah. I know that you don't want to be found on the internet, so I won't ask. But we just wanted to thank you for being here. This was super fun. I would be very curious to have you back with your sister and hear about some of your shared memories. We'll just put that into the universe. Is there anything else that you want to share before we wrap up?
No, I think that this was really fun. And in preparing for this, I think that my favorite thing to think about was obviously how important food was to me personally, but also just thinking about how much joy it brings my family, that it's such a source of so much good memories and good conversations, and keeping certain spirits alive too, and being able to reflect on that, and like how I do that, how it reflects on my identity. It was really it really made me think about it in a way that I hadn't before, even though I think these things were just happening. So thank you for the opportunity to get to like talk about those things.
Of course.
Like it feels good.
That's what we're here for. Oh, this is awesome. Listeners at home, if you would like to make Tinola, you can check out the show notes or you can find our website, worstqualitycrab.com. You can also find us on Instagram at worstqualitycrab. And if you would like to email us, you can do that at worstqualitycrabpod@gmail.com. Again, we will get Nicole's closest approximation to her recipe up. And then, as with all of our recipes, make it your own. It'll be great. And until next time, we will talk to everybody soon. Hope you are out there cooking something yummy and maybe this dish, because it is where we are. It is cold. So yeah, happy cooking, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.